I'm Elaine Viets. John Babcock does the work of five men. He impersonates Sir Paul McCartney. He's a Beatle tribute artist who can play Paul McCartney as well as John Lennon and Ringo Starr, three Beatles. He's also a musician who writes and performs his own music. But John is no ordinary Beatle impersonator. He actually met the real Paul McCartney when he was at the Abbey Road Studios. He'll tell us more on today's Dead End Job Show. I'm Elaine Viets, and we're talking to John Babcock, Beatle tribute artist and musician, on today's Dead End Job Show. John, it's been 50 years since the Beatles came to America and changed our music, so this has to be a busy year for you. When did you first hear Beatles music?
First time I heard any Beatles record was 1963. They hadn't even come here yet. It was in the fall of '63. I was at nursery school, and I was running around in the backyard with the kids, and there was a gentleman that was the maintenance person that cut the grass and all that, and he had a radio on his garage. In the distance, I heard George Harrison's voice singing, "Do You Want to Know a Secret?" That's the first time I heard of him, before the Ed Sullivan Show.
Wow. So it made a big impression on you, even at that age.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As soon as I heard it, I was like, what is that? And I went over there, and I kind of broke away from the kids and walked down this little pathway, maybe 10, 20 feet. And the man was standing there, and I said, I want to hear your radio. And I stood there and listened to it. That's when I got hooked.
How did you get to be
5 years old?
5 years old? They hooked you young. How did you get to be a Beatles impersonator?
What happened was I grew up playing music in my first bands in high school and then later on in my early 20s. But then I eventually I moved to Florida in 1990, and I met some guys that were originally up from New Jersey, New York, that were former cast members of Beatlemania, and they asked me to come and work with them, and I did some road things with them, and I also did stuff with them at Epcot Center in Florida.
So how long have you been a Beatles impersonator?
Well, let's see. Really doing it kind of like on a full-time basis since 1997.
Wow. Now you play Paul, the cute Beatle, and I've heard you sing. In fact, I played you singing All My Lovin' for my husband, and he said, "So, it's a Beatles song." And I said, No, that's a Beatles impersonator. You really do sound like him in some of your music.
Well, I guess I got lucky with that, But I have been singing the songs for so many years that you kind of grow into them a bit,
Well, singing a Beatles song, what I noticed, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of the songs that sound slow are actually a lot faster than people give them credit for, which can make them difficult to sing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. I mean, people would say that if they're saying about that based on the records,
Mm-hmm.
which is what most people know, but most people never got to hear them live. And there is one live album out that came out in the '70s called Live at the Hollywood Bowl that hasn't been issued yet on CD. So there's a whole generation that never really heard them live and have not heard that recording. But if you had heard them, the live versions of it, you would say, wow, now that's fast. Because they would play songs like If I Fell, and the record was slow, and then they play it live, and it seemed like it was almost twice as fast because they used to rush their performances. They only did 11 songs within 30 minutes. That was their shows in those days. So they played stuff extremely fast.
But you never heard them live. All you heard was a million girls shrieking all at once.
That's true. That's right. That's very true. If you seen interviews over the years, especially during the Beatles anthology, when George and Ringo Paul were interviewed about their touring days, they said it just got to the point where the audience was louder than the band, and it was very difficult for them to continue on. That was one of the reasons why they quit touring, is because especially in 1966, the sound systems were primitive by today's standards, and the volume of the audience would just drown them out. So after 4 years of touring the world, I think they got to the point where they just said, enough of this, we can't improve on this, so let's go in the studio and try to make better music, better records, and that's what they did.
You recorded at the famous Abbey Road studio, actually in studio number 2, where Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Band was made. When was that, and what was it like?
Well, I recorded there. The first time I went to Abbey Road was I went for a visit in September of 1984. It was set up by some friends of mine over in England. And then after I went and saw the studio for a couple hours, had lunch there, I was determined to come back and record some songs for an album I was recording at the time called Out of the Blue. I was in New Jersey at the time, so I was still living up in, working in Jersey, living in New York. So after 6 months, I went there and recorded several songs with my producer at the time, a fellow named Bob Swade, and he helped engineer it and produced it with me. And it was a wonderful experience to be in that space, to be in that actual room of all those songs that were recorded, including the first one I ever heard as a 5-year-old, almost 5-year-old, in that schoolyard in Nyack, New York. So, and you can to actually use, not only be in the same studio, but use some of the keyboards, some of the old pianos, a harpsichord, and that they actually used on the original records. That stuff in 1985, when I went there, was still there.
What was the studio like? Because the ones I've been in have been kind of run down and ratty, and there's cords snaking all over, and there's foam baffling up on the wall. So was it run down, or was it new?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't really run down, but as George Harrison said, there was not a lot of atmosphere in there, especially in the '60s. It was pretty white, but it was kind of dingy. The lighting, it was kind of like industrial, almost like being in a factory. There was no mood to it. Not like you have colored lights and you can invade yourself with some atmosphere. So they eventually changed that a bit. But the studio is pretty much the same as it was in the '60s, but they kept up on it. But it still has, the walls are still the original tan brick walls. The baffles that are on there's 4 fold-out walls that were originally put in 1961, and they're still there. But they keep things clean and all. And now it's like really like since the '80s, like they started really improving on the look of it because it was becoming. They were realizing that this was really a historic place. And of course, when I was working in there the first time in '85, the Beatles were only in there 17 years before with recording Abbey Road. So, now it's it's 45 years almost. It's a lot of times gone by. Now they really, really have it just really tweaked nice. It's almost like, and they allow people to come in and see it. Sometimes they'll open up to the public for special events. So it's really nice and neat and clean. But it's still original. It's pretty much still the way it was.
How did you meet Sir Paul McCartney, and was he Sir Paul when you met him?
No, he was. That's a great question. He wasn't Sir Paul. He actually got knighted in 1997. I met him July 20th of 1995, and I did not know he was there. I had heard that was, as a matter of fact, 95 was the last time I actually worked at Abbey Road. I did record sections between 85 and 95. I did about half a dozen sessions for 3 albums. So the last time I was there was in July of 95, and I was just I wasn't actually working that day. I wasn't actually recording in number 2 that day, but I had gotten there a day early to drop the master tapes off to the library at Abbey Road, and I knew some people there, so I had some friends that still worked there that I knew. And I was sitting in the restaurant bar. It's a lounge restaurant at Abbey Road. It's open only to the artists and to the staff. And I was just sitting there having a pint of Guinness with a friend of mine, and in walked George Martin, which I was thrilled. Just, oh my God, the Beatles producer. Here he is. And it was great. He came in and matter of fact, I had a book on me, the recording Sgt. Pepper by George Martin. I actually had that book in a briefcase that was sitting next to me that I brought over and was reading on the plane. I just bought it in New York. And it was amazing. There he was, and he walked in, and I said, oh, George Martin, maybe I can get him to sign the book, So I was waiting to kind of say, maybe be introduced by somebody. I didn't want to bother him, so I waited, and he got a plate of food on a tray, and he walked around, and as he walked around and sat down about 15 feet away from me at a small table, there was Paul McCartney sitting down with him and with Paul's assistant, and they sat down there, and I was like, oh, can't believe it. There he is. And I had so many times I had been in there, with my brother Ryerson. he's my younger brother. He went with me the first 2 trips, and we just missed him in '86 by like literally one day. He was in the studio doing a video for a song called Press, and we were scheduled to record there. So me and my brother missed him just by one day, and then finally, it took 9 years later, I actually met him, and he was just really, really nice. We got introduced, and first thing he wanted to know is, are you working here? It was one of those things, And he said, I said, yeah. I said, well, I've been here before. I said, I recorded an album here called Matthew Street. And that's one of the titles of the last albums I had done there. And he goes, Matthew Street, that sounds familiar. And it should have sounded familiar to him because he kind of joked with me about it, because Matthew Street what is the street where the Cavern Club was in Liverpool. That's where they got their start.
Ah.
And, right. So the song on the album, Matthew Street, I wrote back in 93 or 94, and that became the title track for that album. And it's about the Beatles, but it's about the people of Liverpool and the town. I don't know if you've ever been over there, but it's just, they're the greatest people over there. They, the hospitality is just fantastic. They treat you so good. You go over. I think they remember what we did for them during the war, during World War II. And they as soon as they find out, oh, you're from New York, hey, come on, Yankees. I mean, you can't buy yourself a beer. They take good care of you. And so he asked me. I told him about that. Then we had a little chat, and then we shook hands. And he said, "Good luck in your recording, man. Good luck in your recording." I was like, "Oh, it's like getting the blessing from the Pope of rock and roll." It was. But can you imagine? You're just a childhood hero. Yeah, one of them anyway. All 4 of them. That was Paul. Great.
What was he? What was he like? Was he the way you thought he would look? Was he smaller? Was he bigger?
Yeah, he was. He looked younger than I thought.
Huh.
The thing is, at that time, he was 53. 53 years old then. I believe he's 71 or 72 now, but and he still looks great. But he was 53 then, and I've never seen pictures of him at the time before I met him, and I thought, hey, he looks good for 53. But when I actually met him, he looked like he was in his mid-40s. He really looked good. Hardly any gray, and I remember standing there looking at him. It's like it was weird. It was just weird, John Lennon said, "Never aspire to meet your heroes." He said, but this one, I think I have to make an exception for this because he didn't let me down. It was really cool. He was just a really classy guy. Like I've always seen him in his interviews, and he wanted to really know more about what I was doing. He treated me not as a fan, but he treated me as an artist, which was great.
That is great. Now, when you play him, do you play the Sir Paul or the non-Sir Paul, the Paul McCartney that you met in '93? Do you have special hand gestures, a kind of mindset when you're out there doing Paul McCartney solo? What kind of Paul McCartney are you trying to convey?
Well, it depends on what. If I'm doing it on my own as a solo thing, obviously it's doing Sir Paul. So I kind of, the mannerisms is kind of my approach when I'm on stage. I'm just talking about relating to the audience and whatnot. Besides singing the songs like him, I kind of studied his videos, and I've seen him on tour, every tour he's done since 1976 with Winds Over America. So, I've got a backlog of all his performances, and I've studied how he moves and, kind of what he says, and I kind of work with that and just kind of do that as the best I can. But when I do him in the Beatles, he's, even when he was younger, he was a little bit more bouncier. His gestures, hand gestures, and the way he did things were a little bit different. He's a little bit more laid back because everybody changes as you get older. So he was more of a kid then. So I got to kind of act more like a kid, act more like a 24-year-old as opposed to somebody who's, in their 60s, 70s. So it's interesting to see how he changed over the years. But he still bounces around and does his thing, but it's just not as much. So there's a little bit of a difference.
When you play Paul as a solo act, I can hear women screaming on the soundtrack. Do they chase you and throw you their room keys and underwear?
no, those days are over. That was a long time ago, because most of them were like in their 50s, you know, and they're either, you know, been married for 40 years or whatever, you know. No, it's just, you know what it is. Yes, they do get crazy. They scream and yell, and the guys clap, and they dance around, and you know, and it's great. The shows are always great like that, because it's just a testament to the music, about how great the music is, the songs, how great they are, and that we go and give them a good night out, you know, just give them a good time out, and that's what we do when I do the Beatles shows. Same thing with the solo act, too. I mean, I do these dinner theaters and things, and it's wonderful because, you know, people just, they relive their youth through the music, so part of it's nostalgia, but most of it is just the songs are so good and everybody knows them. That's what it's all about.
Now, you're one of the rare Beatles tribute artists who can also play Ringo and John. So how do you do that? Do you have to get in a different frame of mind? And what do you do about Ringo's nose?
Yeah, that's funny. People ask those questions. To be honest with you, I've been doing Paul more than anything, especially in the last 12 years, 10, 12 years. When I first started doing working at Disney at Epcot, I was doing a show out there. I actually was doing the John Lennon position, but it wasn't really a full-blown Beatles show. It was like half Beatles, and we were doing a lot of Great Invasion stuff as well. So I would be singing sometimes during the Pacemaker songs. We all kind of did different things, but I pretty much played rhythm guitar and did Lennon on the Beatles songs for when we were doing that. And also, I would sometimes, the drummer would not be there, or he'd have to go do something else, and I would fill in on drums. So I had to learn all the Ringo drum parts and all the British Invasion songs, the Stones and Jerry the Pacemakers, Hermits, all that. And so I'd have to play three different positions, but for the most part, I've always done pretty much Paul. So for theater shows, that's pretty much what I do is McCartney. And I have done theater shows with Lennon, but Ringo, I never really had to do that, so I didn't have to worry about putting a fake nose on. You know, that didn't come into play. I did the drums stuff pretty much in the theme part, but not in the theaters for Ringo.
Well, it's funny to look back and see the 1964 and 63 British invasion, and everyone commenting on those hairstyles, which look really conservative now.
Yeah,
absolutely. You wonder what the fuss was all about.
Well, you know what it is if you forget, and you go back 50 years now. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Beatles and the Ed Sullivan Show, which is in February. February 9th is when they first went on national television. 73 million people. It was the biggest audience in the history of television on CBS. And the thing about I remember seeing that. I remember being a little kid and watching that. Only months after I first heard that Beatles song in the schoolyard, my father, who was a professional jazz drummer, and he was already teaching me the drums by the time I was 3 or 4 years old. So I was already, playing stuff that he listened to. He was showing me some jazz things and standards. But he heard that the Beatles were coming over here, and even though I just turned 5 years old, he said, because we used to watch the Ed Sullivan Show anyway, and it came on at 8 o'clock. It wasn't that late. So he said, but you could definitely stay up tonight, watch this, because there's this group called the Beatles coming from England. And I remember thinking just like everybody else, especially a kid, Beatles, it's like bugs or something like that. First thing I thought. You didn't think about the B-E-A-T, the beat,
Right.
It was Beatles. Okay, so it was bugs, Then they came on, Ed introduced them and on our RCA black and white TV set, like most people in 1964. And there they were. And I remember, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I just had the same feeling I had when I heard the first song, All My Love, as I did when I heard Do You Want It on Secret in the schoolyard. It was the same thing. That's what I heard. I just knew that was the same performers, but to see them and see their hair, I remember at the time, oh boy, because I, like all the kids, had like little, short haircut, almost like a crew cut, I mean, I think that's what the shock was, because they were radically long, but you're right, by today's standards, it's almost conservative, really. But it was cool because they had a look, and they I remember I didn't know which one. All I knew Ringo was the drummer because my dad told me. The drummer's name was Ringo. But I didn't, when I saw them there, I didn't really know, you didn't really know who they were. They all kind of looked the same, which is funny to think about now, 50 years later. I mean, they're such legendary performers. They're the most recognized human beings maybe on earth for those four guys,
Well, that was very forward-thinking of your dad to have you watch them. I think a lot of dads were turning off the TV that night.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, especially, me being a little boy, because, I mean, he could have probably got away with that with me, but there was a lot of dads that had, 14-year-old daughters that knew all about them already. So believe me, those TVs weren't being shut off. They were, they were kept on, But I think that it was a wonderful thing that happened there with that. Just an amazing night. And, here it is 50 years later. We're celebrating this coming of these four young men and the changing of the direction of popular music. Everything changed that night. It was all done. Whatever was before was pretty much wiped away.
Now, tell us about your DVD, JB's Abbey Road Studios Tour and Video Album.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's something that I'm getting ready to release real soon. I hope to have it released on my website officially where it can be ordered from me probably in April or May. Put the final touches on it now. And what it is it's a lot of it is videos I did in the 80s and 90s for several songs from different albums I did. But the main centerpiece of it is the DVD title itself, Abbey Road Tour, JB's Abbey Road Tour. And what that is I've taken all this video footage that I taped in 1985, the first time I went over, and my brother was the cameraman. He came behind me, and I walked through the studio from the front entrance to the car park. And we did this. We were there for 3 days at that time with 3 days of sessions. And he followed me through the studio, and we did it at a time when it was in the later afternoon. I think it was on a Sunday, so there wasn't a lot of activity. I think I was the only artist that was actually recording in there around 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was a perfect time for him to kind of do like a tour behind me. So he walked with the camera, and we walked in the entrance. We went through the reception room, and then we went down the main hallway. We went into Studio 3, which was on the left-hand side on the top floor. And then we ended up going down Studio 2, which is also on the control room is elevated and it's on the top floor. And then to go down to the studio, you have to go down a flight of stairs. So we went through there, and then we went to big studio number 1 where all the orchestrations were done. So in all the control rooms, we went by the restaurant, and the whole time I was narrating what was going on. But what I did was I had decided to take all the original footage because the audio wasn't very good on it. It just there was unfortunately there was a hum that was on the soundtrack of it, so I didn't really feel it was technically up to snuff. So what I figured I'd do is, and I thought would be more interesting, is to edit all the video footage together in an 18 to 20-minute piece, and then narrate it today, me looking at it now and talking about what I did back then. So that's the way I did it. So what you have is you have this vintage JB going through is doing his first sessions at Abbey Road at the studio where the old equipment is still there, and I'm showing the old pianos on it, but I'm talking about it now.
Well, that sounds good. Now, give us your website again, so we know. What is your website address?
Yeah, website is babcockmusic.com.
And that's 2 B's in Babcock, like Beatles,
yes.
right?
Yes,
right.
That's like Beatles, not like the furniture store.
For the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, you did a song. What's the connection, John, between the Beatles and President Kennedy?
Well, I wrote a song in 1988 and then re-recorded it and released it with a video in last year in November for the 50th anniversary, and it's called Passing the Torch. The song went out nationally on a show called Growing Bolder. And then what happened was, because of that, I'm working on a new album now. Just recently, after Christmas, I wrote a song about the connection between Kennedy's assassination and the popularity of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, 1964. That a lot of people believe that because of Kennedy's assassination, because this country was in such a dark period, that we welcomed some fresh air, and the Beatles were it. And the song is going to be released in the next month or so, and it's called "What a Way to Say Our Goodbyes."
Well, thank you again, John Babcock, singer, songwriter, Beatles impersonator, and Sir Paul McCartney tribute artist. I'm Elaine Viets, and you're listening to the Dead End Job Show.
Twilight of the gods within our hands, they brought us together from a distant land. They gave us both reason, a purpose in life, gave us the answer, we found inner light. We healed through the music, it took many years. The hearts were still broken, they dried up our tears, taking us down to the fields. The gates were wide open, nothing was real. Singing is all we could do. We tried not to sing out of tune. Dark days would fade, love came back into our lives. What a way to say our goodbyes. Cold winter evening in black and white, we all came together for a change that night. 8 arms to hold us, to make it alright. For a few minutes, the future looked bright. Orange and yellow swirling, spins round and round, lifting up our spirits as we listen to the sound.